All right, welcome to another deep dive. You ready to jump into today's stack of global news?
Oh, always. What kind of rabbit holes are we diving into this time?
Well, we've got a bit of everything today. Economics, a bit of politics, a dash of tech, even a story about, well, plastic surgery. It's a real mixed bag, but I think we can pull out some interesting threads and see how it all connects.
Sounds like a fun challenge, like piecing together a puzzle, right?
Exactly. So let's start piecing. And maybe the biggest piece in the puzzle right now is, well, Ukraine. Can't seem to get away from it in the news these days.
No, definitely not. And we've got two pretty different Ukraine stories in the stack today.
Yeah, first one is, well, it's about money. Big money. Seems like former President Trump is demanding $500 billion from Ukraine.
$500 billion. That's just an astronomical sum of money. Calling it protection money, some are.
Yeah, and I gotta ask, what does a demand like that even mean for Ukraine? I mean, is that even possible?
Well, it's definitely a demand that could completely reshape the global landscape. I mean, think about it. $500 billion is significantly more than what Germany had to pay after World War I.
Wow. Yeah, that puts it in perspective.
And it really raises the question of, what are the motivations here? Is this genuine support for Ukraine, or is this a move towards making Ukraine economically dependent on the U.S.?
Yeah, it's almost like, I don't know, making Ukraine into a sort of economic colony.
That's a comparison some experts are making, drawing parallels to, well, to historical instances of economic coercion, where powerful nations used debt to exert control over weaker ones.
It's a lot to think about. I mean, imagine you're just an average Ukrainian trying to rebuild your life, and then you hear this news.
It's definitely a development worth watching closely. The implications of a sum this large are far-reaching. It's something you, as no one who follows global events, you need to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's switch gears a bit. Still in Ukraine, but this time it's a more human story. There's a group of North Korean soldiers captured in Ukraine who are now saying they want to defect to South Korea.
It's really a fascinating human element in the middle of all the geopolitics, We're talking young guys, probably early 20s, sent to fight a war thousands of miles from home, and now faced with becoming prisoners of war, they're looking for a way out.
You can't help but wonder what they're thinking, right? What makes someone risk everything to defect to a country they've been taught to hate?
The motivations are complex. It could be fear, desperation, maybe even a hope for a better life. The article mentions the propaganda element, too. I mean, both sides could use these soldiers' stories for their own gain. But, let's not forget the human element. These are individuals caught in the crossfire, looking for safety, and maybe a chance at a new beginning.
It's a stark reminder that behind all the headlines and all the politics, there are real people whose lives are being turned upside down.
Absolutely. And while it's easy to get caught up in the bigger picture, we have to remember the individual stories of those who are caught in the middle of it all.
Okay, so let's shift focus now, away from the war in Ukraine to some economic news that might hit a little closer to home for our listeners. We've got a couple of developments that could impact your wallet, maybe even your travel plans. First up, some news about Air Premia, the airline.
Yeah, they've been having some issues, haven't they? Schedule changes, cancellations, all due to maintenance problems, it seems.
Exactly. So if you're booked on Air Premia anytime soon, especially flights between Incheon and San Francisco or LA, double check that flight status. Like right now, the article says they're offering free changes, within a 7-day window of your original booking, of course, subject to seat availability and all that, but also full refunds, no penalty.
Yeah, nobody wants to deal with a canceled flight, especially if you've got important plans.
Absolutely not. And speaking of things that can be stressful for your wallet, we've got some news about tariffs. Former President Trump, he's announced a 25% tariff on all imported cars, and that's sending shockwaves through the auto industry.
Yeah, this tariff has the potential to really shake up the global car market.
The article specifically mentions Tesla and Korean automakers as being hit pretty hard. I mean, we're already seeing a surge in used Tesla sales here in the U.S. Probably people trying to snag one before prices go up because of the tariff.
And you have to think about Korean automakers. They export a huge percentage of their cars to the U.S., so this tariff is a big deal for them.
It's all connected, isn't it? Like one policy decision can create these domino effects across entire industries, even across national borders. But it does raise an interesting question. If tariffs are supposed to protect domestic industries, why are used Teslas? I mean, those are American-made cars. Why are they seeing such a jump in demand?
It's like consumers are anticipating price increases on all cars, not just the imported ones. Could be because of the global supply chain. Even if a car is made here, a lot of the parts might be imported. So if those parts get more expensive because of the tariff, domestic manufacturers might have to raise their prices too.
That's a good point. Makes you wonder if these tariffs will actually work the way they're intended, or if they might end up hurting consumers and businesses in ways no one expected.
It's a tough question, one that economists and policymakers are wrestling with right now. And it's a good reminder that these decisions have very real consequences.
Absolutely. Okay, now let's talk about something that could impact your finances in a very different way, gold. There's a prediction from Goldman Sachs. They say gold prices could skyrocket to $3,100 an ounce by the end of the year.
That's a pretty bold prediction. And it's got investors talking. They're pointing to a few factors. Central banks are buying up more gold. There's the potential for inflation. And then there's just the general economic uncertainty. All the trade wars, the geopolitical tensions. It's making people nervous.
Yeah, it makes sense. When the world feels shaky, people look for safe havens, and gold has always been that. You know, it reminds me of a friend who, a few years back, when gold prices dipped, she panicked and sold all her jewelry, kicking herself now.
It's a good reminder, though. Markets can be unpredictable. But gold, historically, it tends to hold its value when things get rough.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. Not giving financial advice or anything, but, do your research. But let's move on to something a little more uplifting. What do you say?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right, well, there was this poll recently, and the results were kind of surprising. Over 50% of Japanese people now have a favorable view of Korea.
That's pretty significant, considering the history between those two countries. Seems like relations might be thawing a bit. Could be due to all the cultural exchange that's been happening, the music, the films, the tourism.
It's a little glimmer of hope, right? I mean, the world feels so divided these days, so to see two countries with a history like theirs moving towards understanding and cooperation, it's encouraging.
It's a good reminder of the power of people-to-people connections.
All right, last story for this part of our dive, and this one has me pretty excited, I gotta say. South Korea is going to build the world's largest AI data center.
Now, that's an ambitious project. We're talking about a 3-gigawatt facility. Think about that. 3 times bigger than that Stargate project that OpenAI and SoftBank are building in Texas. And the investment, we're talking potentially up to $35 billion.
It's almost hard to grasp how much computing power that represents. What do you think? What are the implications of something like this?
Well, it could put South Korea on the map as a global leader in AI. I mean, it could attract top talent, lead to all sorts of breakthroughs in medicine, robotics, finance, you name it.
It's really incredible to see how technology is reshaping the world and how nations are competing to be at the forefront.
It's a competition with huge stakes, for sure. Whoever controls the most powerful AI, well, they'll have a significant advantage in the years to come.
Makes you wonder what the world will look like in 10, 20 years. What kind of technologies will we see and how will they change our lives? But you know what? We need our rest if we want to see all that. Speaking of which, let's talk about sleep. It seems like South Korea, for all its technological progress, is facing a bit of a sleep crisis.
Yeah, the data's a bit alarming. South Korea ranks near the bottom globally when it comes to how satisfied people are with their sleep. They're not getting enough, and they're relying heavily on sleep aids.
It's probably got a lot to do with their work culture, right? It's super intense.
Definitely a factor. We see it in a lot of high-achieving societies. People push themselves to the limit, and sleep is often the first thing to go. But the thing is, sleep isn't just about feeling rested. It's crucial for our health, for our mental well-being, for our ability to think clearly, even our long-term health.
Yeah, I know I've been guilty of burning the midnight oil too many times, but seeing this data really makes you stop and think.
It's a wake-up call for all of us, really. No matter where we live or what we do, we need to make sleep a priority. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity.
So we've covered a lot of ground already in this deep dive. War in Ukraine, economic anxieties, the rise of AI, even the importance of a good night's sleep. And we're not done yet. Still got more fascinating stories to unpack, so stick with us as we continue our whirlwind tour of global news.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're picking up right where we left off with our global news roundup.
Still got plenty to explore. Ready for round 2.
Absolutely. So you know that massive AI data center we were talking about, the one South Korea is building? Well, turns out there's a pretty interesting figure behind it. The grandson of LG's founder, he's the one spearheading the whole project.
Oh, wow. That adds another layer to the story, doesn't it? It's like LG, they're known for electronics, but they're really recognizing the potential of AI, making a big move into that world.
It's almost like they're weaving their family legacy into the future of technology. And it's not just about LG, right? This project could really shake things up for South Korea's economy as a whole, attract investment, create new opportunities.
It's all about global players, isn't it? And speaking of which, we got to talk about China. They've been making some serious moves in the gold market lately.
Oh yeah, aggressively increasing their gold reserves. They were the biggest buyer in December, snagged a whopping 45 tons.
45 tons? I can't even picture that much gold.
It brings their total to over 2,000 tons. Makes them one of the top holders of gold worldwide.
Wow. So what's the strategy there? Are they getting ready for some kind of economic doomsday scenario?
It's probably a mix of things. Diversifying their assets, moving away from the US dollar, looking for stability. Gold has always been seen as a safe haven, something that holds its value when everything else is going crazy.
So what's the takeaway for the rest of us? Should we be rushing out to buy gold bars?
Well, like with any investment, you got to do your homework, understand the risks. But China's moves definitely suggest gold could be a smart move in the long run, especially with all the economic uncertainty in the world right now.
Definitely food for thought. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit, back to something we all deal with. Sleep. We were talking about South Korea's sleep deprivation problem earlier, but turn out it's not just them. It's a global thing.
You're absolutely right. Data shows that a lot of countries are struggling with the same issues. Japan, Israel, even the U.S. Everyone's sleep deprived.
No wonder we're all so tired all the time. But here's the thing that I find interesting. Even in countries where people are getting a decent amount of sleep on average, there's still this gap between how much they're getting and how much they want to be getting.
Yeah, it's like globally, there's this difference of about an hour and 20 minutes between actual sleep time and desired sleep time. So it's not just about how many hours you're clocking, it's about the quality of that sleep too.
It's like we need to pay more attention to our sleep habits and make sure we're getting enough rest. Our bodies and our minds need that time to recover.
Couldn't agree more. Sleep is essential. It's not just about feeling good, it's about our overall health and well-being.
For sure. Okay, ready for another quick trip around the world? Let's head back to Japan for a minute. It seems like things are continuing to improve between them and Korea. Public sentiment's shifting in a positive direction.
Yep. Remember that poll we were talking about earlier? Well, it was conducted by NHK, Japan's public broadcaster, and it found that over 56% of Japanese people now have a favorable view of Korea. It's a big jump from previous years, especially among the younger generations.
So what's behind this change? Just time passing, or is there something else going on?
Well, it seems like all the cultural exchange is really making a difference. The music, the movies, even tourism. As younger people in both countries experience each other's cultures, those old stereotypes start to fade away.
It gives you hope, even with all the conflict in the world, we can still connect with each other, build bridges.
Absolutely. It shows the power of understanding and how positive interactions can really make a difference.
All right, let's wrap up this part of our news journey with a story that brings us back to the U.S. Remember that 25% tariff on imported cars? Well, it seems to have had a bit of an unexpected side effect. It's actually driving up demand for used Teslas.
Yeah, people are worried about prices going up on new electric cars, so they're turning to the used market, trying to get their hands on a Tesla before they become even more expensive.
It's amazing how one policy decision can have these ripple effects, change the way people behave.
Shows you how connected everything is. Global markets, consumer behavior, it's all intertwined. And sometimes even well-intentioned policies can have consequences that nobody saw coming.
So much to think about. We've covered a lot of ground in the second part of our global news roundup. Technology, finance, cultural exchange, even the importance of rest. And there's still more to come. Stay tuned for the final leg of our deep dive as we uncover even more fascinating stories from around the world. And we're back. Final stretch of our global news dive, ready to wrap things up.
You bet. Got some more intriguing stories lined up.
Oh, definitely. Let's talk about Elon Musk for a minute. You know how former President Trump appointed him to that key position?
Yeah, I remember that. Seems like it's causing a bit of a stir.
It is. A lot of people are not happy about it.
Makes sense. Musk is, well, he's a polarizing figure.
Yeah, and it's affecting Tesla. Some people are actually boycotting their cars because of Musk's political involvement.
It's wild, isn't it? Like a CEO's political stance can actually impact car sales.
Yeah, it's a sign of the times, I guess. Everything's so polarized. Consumers are really paying attention to what companies stand for.
It's like they're not just buying a product anymore. They're buying into the company's values, or at least they're trying to.
It's a good reminder for businesses, right? They don't exist in a vacuum. What they do, what they stand for, it all matters.
Absolutely. Okay, let's lighten things up a bit. Remember that woman who had the life-changing nose job?
Oh, yeah. Her story really resonated with people.
I think it touched on something that a lot of us think about.
Definitely. The article said her social media has been blowing up. People sharing their own experiences, thinking about getting similar procedures.
It shows how our views on plastic surgery are changing. It's not as taboo as it used to be.
It's definitely more mainstream now, but like we were talking about before, it's important to be thoughtful about it.
Right. It could be a great tool for some people, but you have to go into it with realistic expectations.
And for the right reasons.
Exactly. Okay, before we say goodbye, let's touch on travel again. We talked about those Air Premia flight disruptions, but this one's a bit more positive. Things are looking up between Japan and Korea, which is great news if you're thinking about a trip to Asia.
Always looking for travel inspiration.
Well, those improving relations, they're good for tourism. More flights, easier travel. It's a win-win.
And with all the cultural exchange going on, there's so much to see and experience.
It's the perfect time to explore those destinations.
I'm already making a list. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our global news deep dive. It's been a whirlwind, hasn't it?
It has. We've covered so much ground.
But hopefully it's given our listeners something to think about.
Definitely. The world's a complex place.
It is. But even with all the challenges, there's always hope. There's innovation, there's connection, there's people working to make things better.
And that's worth remembering. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time. Keep exploring, keep learning, keep diving deep.